So to the average person, that's watching this, to the business people, number one is Alphabet. Tesla, who has done more than a lot of these guys can argue because he's actually tried to make an impact. And they're not even in the top 12. Okay, and then even on the S&P, I think the score wasn't sufficient enough where he was removed from it. He got criticized for it. Can you pull up the tweet that Elon Musk has on what he said about it? I think Elon has a tweet about ESG. I sent you as well, just so right there. Yeah, Exxon is rated top 10 best in the world for environment, social, and governance by S&P 500, while Tesla didn't even make the list. ESG is a scam. It has weaponized by phony social justice warriors. Okay, guys like him, this doesn't help them. Startup guys coming up, they want to raise capital. But no, your score isn't good. We're not going to give you $100 million or $200 million, $300 million. The average guy that's got a job making $82,000, he's like, come on, Vivek. You want me to? I already have so many different issues. I'm trying to worry about who's going to run for office. I want to know whether the Joe Burrow from Cincinnati is going to win the Super Bowl or not. I'm still celebrating Messi won the World Cup. Well, he's the greatest of all time. You want me to add another acronym to my list of worrying about ESG? Why should I care? What would you say to that?
So it's a good question. Maybe you shouldn't care. And here's a good case for not caring. If you are fine with your own money being used to advance a climate agenda or a racial equity agenda, if you are fine with using your dollars to tell Apple that they have to adopt a racial equity hiring system that they don't want to adopt, or that oil companies should produce less oil, even if that means higher prices at the pump, there's no problem with this because that's what a good number of people would want to do with their own money. Turns out, though, most Americans don't want to advance that agenda with their own money, their hard-earned life savings, their 401k accounts, their retirement accounts, their brokerage accounts. They don't want that. Well, it turns out the rude surprise is, guess what? Your money is being used to advance those agendas anyway. So you think you go to the ballot box and vote every November? That's what you said people are concerned about? Guess what? I got news for you. You're already voting every day without your knowledge, with your own hard-earned dollars to do it, for policies that undermine the very objectives that you think you're voting for when you pull that lever at the ballot box. And so they're making a farce out of your vote. That's just the first thing. So now you go to the gas pump and you're paying $5 gas, last summer. On one hand, you are using your 401k account to cause oil companies to produce less oil, which causes gas prices to go up. Yet with the other hand, you're also paying $5 gas. So you're left holding the bag both ways, while some client in China gets to invest in a Chinese BlackRock fund that gets to own PetroChina, which is buying up some of the projects on the other side. So the question is, if you are willing to sacrifice investment return in your dollars and your hard-earned savings to advance a one-dimensional vision of how to solve climate change or address systemic racism through quota systems or whatever, then there's no problem for you. You need not worry about this. In fact, I have good news for you. That's exactly what's happening with your money. If you did not want to advance those agendas with your own hard-earned dollars, I have bad news for you. Your money is probably being used to advance those agendas anyway. And so on one hand, you didn't get that promotion at work because we don't have meritocratic hiring systems at many companies anymore because of the S-prong of the ESG movement. On the other hand, the 5% that you put away into your 401k account, your money was actually used to create that very situation. So if that bothers you, then be bothered. And if not, it's
leave
cool.
it alone.
Can I follow up with that? I like what you said initially when you said, listen, rather than just kind of harping about the problem, I actually developed something more of a solution. The name of your company.
Strive.
Respect. We'll get to that. But I want to kind of touch on the average person, because I have conversations with the average person, average people, about saving money and investing money. And it is a heavy task to ask them to start a 401k and to even know what the S&P 500 is and take out an index fund and take out 10% of your paycheck. So it's half of Americans don't even invest, period. Yep. Right? And then we can have a whole nother conversation of how many Americans fill up their gas tank. But when you get into S&P 500, you're investing in these 500 companies and the large cap companies. You see people's mind being like, all right, what the hell's an S&P 500? What's this? And now we're getting so far down the rabbit hole of investing and the nuance. Well, it's actually BlackRock that actually owns the fund that's managing the money, and that's who you're investing your 401k with. And by the way, the shareholders are doing this and that, and their social credits. And you go down, and it's like, I'm just, as an investor, I'm like, dude, I just want to have a 401k and make a return. So for to Pat's question, so it's such a nuanced conversation, because I'm really hearing this for the first time, like, because you were in the inner plumbing, the mechanics of this, you're seeing this. So it's like, on one hand, to his question, why should the average investor care? I get it. But what can they even do about it? They're not at shareholder meetings. They're not in the, in there. So it's like, even if someone hears this and reads the book, it's like, all right, I'm with you, Vivek. What's up? It's like, no, just keep investing in your 401k. Best of luck.
Well, I mean, that's what I found in Strive, right? So, I mean, it's funny. Now I've got this company. It sounds like, I'm saying all this because that could mean that you could, do business with our company. It's actually the other way around.
No, I actually wholeheartedly think that you actually have a point here.
You got to fill that void because people didn't have a choice. I'll just tell you a story though. So on my flight down here today, I was, writing a chapter in my next book. It's going to be coming out. It's going to be about a lot of the same stuff.
You're really writing these books, buddy. I
like writing, actually. It turns out I discovered I was doing biotech for 7 years as a CEO and 7 years as an investor before that. I didn't know I was going to be this. I was going to love writing books this much. Now I'm kind of wearing this hat as an author. But anyway, the story I was writing in the chapter I was working on today was actually about Frederick Douglass in this country. So Frederick Douglass, obviously,
of course, abolitionist.
So one of my favorite stories about Frederick Douglass was that he was lent out as a slave. So not only did he work, the family that owned him, they loaned him out to be able to get extra income or curry favor with neighbors. And so one day he was learning, he was doing work for the neighbor, but the neighbors took quite a liking to him. So the mother figure of that family decided she wanted to teach him how to read. She did that while her husband was at work. One day he came home from work early. He found her teaching him how to read. He was livid because he said, a man with knowledge is not fit to be a slave. Mm-hmm. So the funny part is Frederick Douglass may not have probably did not want to be learning how to read. He was just a kid. Most kids don't like to be sat down and taught how to read either. He's no different than other kids. But he heard that. He knew how much they did not want him to know how to read. And he thought, okay, look, that's probably pretty important for me to figure out. That changed his life. He then started asking other kids as they were coming home, the white boys who were actually allowed to go to school, he would pick up little bits and pieces of knowledge, pieced enough together how to read. Once he knew how to read, he became an autodidact, a self-taught guy, one of the great figures in American history. So why do I bring that up? There was actually a rule change this year. The Biden administration tries to weave ESG into retirement plans. So they changed the rules this year, the federal rule governing retirement plans. It's a boring law called ERISA. Okay. What they said was, actually now these fund managers can take social benefits, what they call collateral benefits other than investment return, into account. Before they weren't allowed to. Now, in the initial rule, what they said was you had to disclose that prominently, that you had to tell the investor, the mom, the pop, the doctor, the nurse, that, hey, I'm not just investing for maximizing your financial return, but I'm also advancing these other objectives. But in the final rule that they actually passed, that disappeared because they said that if you do disclose it, that's going to have a chilling effect. It's going to stop people from using these ESG factors. Same thing as Frederick Douglass, right? Don't tell them, because if you do tell them, then they're going to be empowered to make decisions. So even if these issues bore you before, let me tell you, they are purposefully trying to keep you from seeing it. Just like that father figure in that family wanted to purposely make sure that Frederick Douglass did not know how to read, because a man with knowledge is not fit to be a slave. Well, you know what they told slaves back then? They said, sit down, shut up, and do as you're told. I think we live in a moment in American history where that's what many Americans are told. Sit down, shut up, and do what you're told. And you know what? At a certain point in time, you might even get used to it. That then becomes the new norm, to sit down, shut up, and do as you're told, without recognizing that your own dollars that you put your hard working days into are sacrificed to advance somebody else's social agenda that would make your blood boil if you actually knew what was going on. And so maybe closing your eyes makes yourself feel better. But once you open your eyes, that's when you're actually empowered to act with your own dollars. And so I hope there are tons of other competitors offering other options that allow people to invest in the market and derive a financial return without having to subsidize these progressive one-sided causes. I mean, today they're progressive. Tomorrow they could be conservative for all I know, but subsidize causes that they disagree with. But it's not going to happen either if there are no market alternatives, which is why I started one. But it's also not going to happen if all individuals are just simply apathetic, okay? You would have never had emancipation in this country if a bunch of people were just apathetic about it. Well, I'm not using, and I'm using an analogy. I'm not saying that this is the same thing, of course, as slavery in the United States, but I'm doing it to address your question of why should people care. If you've been lulled into submission and you're okay with that, in a certain sense, you are just in a psychological sense, a slave of the people who enforce those agendas onto you using your labor, in this case, the dollar you earn from your labor, as the weapon to enforce that agenda on you.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.